The strongest amongst the strongest, the world's greatest swordsman, Dracul Hawkeye Mihawk. They say any swordsman who looks into his eyes cowers in fear. Unless his name is Vista. We all know what happens to that shit. Mihawk's character is interesting, to say the least, because unlike any other character in the entire series, Mihawk actually has the best argument for being the strongest in the series. And this is not based off of feats, but pure statements. The hype of this man is crazy. Anyway, to me, Mihawk comes in 3 different forms. They are more like interpretations of his strength. And depending on how you look at the story or how you're reading his feats or his statements, you could come to a conclusion of this is where Mihawk sits in the verse.
What did he say?
First, we have the fraudulent Mihawk, who's the first I'm gonna be addressing today, but yeah. Then we have the second Mihawk, who's probably the most accurate version of Mihawk out there. I think very few people would disagree with this scaling for Mihawk. And then the third version of Mihawk is the Mihawk which people have come to know as the strongest. This Mihawk makes any character who has ever held a blade before within the One Piece verse a Mihawk victim. See a blade in Imu's flower room? Mihawk victim. See Shanks with a blade whilst he's walking? Mihawk victim. Roger was holding a blade? Mihawk victim. Rocks? Mihawk victim. Wait, is that Nika holding a blade whilst in the mural and it's not black? Mihawk victim. Any character without a black blade at this point automatically becomes a Mihawk victim. Anyway, let's see how realistic each and every one of these Mihawks actually are. Fraud Hawk is a painter himself, the man who painted his blade black. Many people in the community have come to a conclusion that Mihawk's title is invalid. They go off the theory that because Kaido's title is not reliable, in the sense that him being the strongest creature in the world isn't backed up by the series, as creatures like Imu, the Gorosei, and even top tiers in the verse, Shanks, and many other characters, if you really think about it, should be able to beat Kaido and kill him. So, going off of that, people have come to the conclusion that Mihawk's title itself has no meaning and holds 0 value just because of that. But then that doesn't make sense, because Kaido's title and Mihawk's title are fundamentally different. Kaido was hearsay. People were like, in a one-on-one fight, always bet on Kaido. People say, he says, she says. It's not really a statement from the narrator himself. But when it comes to Newgate and Kaido, the narrator himself is the one who tells us, no, this guy is the world's strongest swordsman. Same goes for Whitebeard. This man is the world's strongest man. But then there's another group of people who are able to look at this and just ask the simple question: what value does being the world's strongest swordsman even give? Because nobody seems to be aiming for that title. But really, in the world of One Piece, not anyone is aiming for any title specifically. Only the MCs and the main Straw Hat crew is looking for these titles, or are looking for their dreams and chasing them actively. If we look at active pirates, Redhead Shanks, Kaido, Big Mom, these characters could be stated that they wanted to be king of the pirates, but realistically speaking, if they were looking for the One Piece, they should have been able to find it. They had multiple ways to do it, but these guys have just been chilling low and not really pushing it. It's almost as if they did not want to be the king of the pirates, just like Whitebeard. They were not putting enough effort into it. Same goes for anyone trying to be the world's strongest swordsman. Who exactly is challenging Mihawk's title? Vista? No one else is going for Mihawk's title. We have never seen a fight between Fujitora and Mihawk. If Mihawk's title was so important, why aren't Admirals actively chasing this? If Mihawk and Fujitora fought, nobody was going to argue about Mihawk standing as top tier. Would immediately know, nah, Mihawk is that guy, because Fujitora wants his title. But then if the only person who has ever fought you for your title is freaking Zoro, or Vista, or Shanks way back when we don't even know how strong he was back then you see that leaves a lot of loopholes for us to catch the fraudulent in you. Then that leads me to the next point, the Vesta problem. You see, since One Piece began, Mihawk was originally viewed as a top dog, a top tier. Nobody would question how strong Mihawk actually was because of how he dealt with the Baratie Zoro. But then in the current day and age, dealing with the Baratie Zoro is something someone like Shanks would have been able to do using only Conqueror's Haki. Then at that point, that feat is invaluable. It does not help anything in the current situations. We do not care about that feat. We need current feats against the real top tiers we can scale to current top tiers. And if we're looking at that, the last performance of Mihawk where he was active is Marineford. In Marineford, Mihawk's first course of action is to directly engage Whitebeard. He says he wants to gauge the distance between him and Whitebeard, which can honestly be interpreted to mean many things. But that statement doesn't really change much about the story. If it was a strength-based statement, an old Whitebeard who isn't sick should be stronger than Mihawk, so that statement doesn't really contradict anything at all. And if it was just a narrative statement to gauge the true distance whilst calculating his commanders and everybody else who was guarding him, that statement still doesn't contradict anything for Mihawk. But then he goes on and starts actively trying to kill Luffy. Then one of his worst showings in the series is being dodged by a pre-time skip Luffy. This feat right here is very, very, very underwhelming, because if Mihawk was to attack a pre-time skip Luffy, who in this scene seems to have used Future Sight, maybe I'm tripping, who knows, maybe it was really a Future Sight feat for Luffy pre-time skip, and if he didn't dodge that shit, he was gonna get killed. But looking at facts, Luffy shouldn't have been able to dodge an attack from the so-called strongest swordsman at that point in time, because he wasn't able to react to the likes of Kizaru or Kuma, so dodging Mihawk is not a good look. Or another thing that happened is Mihawk getting intercepted by Marineford Mr. One. I keep forgetting this nigga's name. Wait, I think it's Dust Bones. Mihawk gets intercepted by freaking Dust Bones, a guy who Zoro speed blitzed and one-shotted, and he blocked a Mihawk attack. People like to say, swordsman's attacks.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
I do not care. He was not supposed to be able to block that shit. We have seen in multiple occasions being hit by indirect attacks but still getting damage from them. So that statement doesn't mean shit. Either Mihawk was highly suppressed throughout the events of Marineford, or he was just being a bitch and he ain't nothing. But to redeem himself, Mihawk quickly one-taps Dust Bones and moves on. Somehow Luffy was able to avoid his long-range attacks and tank them, which shouldn't be possible like I mentioned earlier, considering the fact that he was able to cut an entire ice glacier with one attack. So if these attacks AP was consistent, which I don't think they were because he was nerfing himself, Luffy would have been cut in half. Anyway, Vesta immediately comes into the picture and not only blocks Mihawk's attack, though it's very visible that Vesta is shaking from this clash. They continue to throw a volley of attacks to each other and they seem pretty evenly matched. And here's where the real problem starts. Mihawk is often held in high regards, put next to Admirals Yonko or even above. So if a character who should be in that playing field isn't able to deal with Vesta, a fourth commander, he's not second, not third, not first, he's a freaking fourth commander. That wouldn't be a good look for anybody. Let's look at his so-called rival as an example. Shanks, after Wano, faces off against Kid. We can't really call it much of a face-off because Shanks immediately one-shots Kid and it's over. Shanks does not have any bit of a fight with Kid. But then let's compare these two characters. Kid, a character who had fought with Big Mom, Kaido, and even went into Big Mom's territory earlier before Wano. This same Kid who has a bounty of 3 billion berries on the level of Law Luffy. Like, this guy is considered a top tier in the verse, and even if we are not looking at his narrative standpoint, let's look at him at a power scaling standpoint. Kid would be above any, if not all, first division commanders, well, with a few exceptions of probably Ben Beckman and Zoro. But this very same Kid was one-tabbed by Shanks. This is impressive for two reasons. One, Big Mom had hit Kid with multiple attacks and even her strongest attack, Misery, and wasn't even put down. But then Shanks goes ahead and one-taps him with one named attack. Okay, let's go under the assumption that this is Shanks' strongest attack, which it definitely isn't, because no character starts by showing us their strongest attack. That's just not how it works. But let's just assume this is his strongest attack, and Mihawk, on the other hand, if his base AP was enough for Vesta to combat with, and his strongest attacks, how high could we scale his strongest attacks if he's being serious? Can we give him the same AP as a Shanks who was able to one-tap Kid, who's multiple times stronger than Vesta Mihawk was going toe-to-toe with? You see, that's where the problem really originates. For that fight alone, Mihawk scaling becomes incredibly